Pass me the new ball. It's time for cricket on the SportsMax Zone. It's already been referred to as an Ashes classic. Australia defeating England by 2 wickets on the final day of the first test at Edgbaston. The visitors taking a 1-0 lead in the 5-match series. The morning session was rained out. Australia resuming after lunch at 107 for 3, needing a further 174 for victory on the final day. The match shifted firmly in England's favour when the Aussies slumped to 227 for 8 in the final session. But an unbroken 55-run 9th wicket stand between captain Pat Cummins and spinner Nathan Lyon steered the visitors to a dramatic win. The Aussies battling to 282 for 8 with Cummins on 44 and Lyon on 16. Usman Khawaja had earlier top scored with 65, while Stuart Broad was the best English bowler with 3-4-64. There are the scores in the match. England 393 for 8 declared and 273. Australia 386 and 282 for 8. Let's welcome Fazir Mohammed to the discussion. Faz, it's been described as an Ashes epic, classic. Did you see it as such?
Yeah, it was a really classic contest. And I think, the thing, Ricardo, what makes a series like this and an opening encounter like this have even more gravitas is that you have 4 more matches to come. And forgive me for harping on the point, but I think it's relevant. If you're talking about like a West Indies, Pakistan, and so many other teams, you win a first test in such a dramatic fashion as the West Indies defeated Pakistan by 1 wicket at Sabina Park a couple of years ago. There's only 1 match left to play. And in any event, the ground is deserted for a number of different factors. This time, though, you've got the complete theatre. You've got a packed house. You've got a really engaged crowd. You've got 2 captains that are really bringing out the best of their players, and especially the England captain. And I think England needs to be given tremendous credit, especially Ben Stokes. That declaration at the end of the first day, I heard your comment about it towards the end of our discussion yesterday, still puzzled by it. The way they batted on the 3rd morning before the rains came, over 100 runs in 1 hour, really opening up the match and basically throwing the gauntlet down to Australia and creating that Colosseum-type atmosphere. And what a dramatic finale today.
I hear you, Faz, and I'm quite happy you went there as it relates to the declaration, because I have no issues with playing aggressive cricket. I have no issues with playing on the front foot. Part of my issue with the declaration at 393 for 8 on the opening day is that it is still so early in the test match. You are playing against one of the best teams in the world. And so it was always a massive risk against Australia to make that type of declaration. And of course, Ben Stokes could not avoid the questions at the end of the match, whether he regretted the declaration. Of course, he said that he didn't regret it. What else is he going to say at this stage? But how does England approach the remainder of this series now, given what happened in this test, given they were on the front foot, and given that the Aussies found a way to come out on top?
I think they'll do it again, because this is precisely the point, Ricardo. It's about doing the unorthodox. And I don't think England lost because of an early declaration. They lost because of chances dropped, opportunities missed, and so on. And credit to the Australians, because they fought towards the end, as you mentioned in the introduction, when they were 227 for 8, you thought the match was over. But things worked for Australia. It worked for Pat Cummins. Any one of those Yorker line delivery that he was backing away to, he could have inside edged onto the stumps. But that's just the way it goes. And the thing is, I think, what we have to commend the English about, given the fact that they are generally considered so dry and boring and predictable, that now with a New Zealander as their coach, with a captain who has grown up in New Zealand and doesn't seem to be constrained by a lot of the fears of being pilloried by the media, and indeed his own personal tragedies of a couple of years ago, that sort of put things in perspective. As the famous Australian all-rounder Keith Miller said in the 1948 tour when he was asked about pressure of an Ashes series, he said, pressure is a German fighter aircraft up your backside in World War II. He said that is pressure. Playing cricket is not pressure. So, again, I don't think by any stretch of the imagination that either Ben Stokes or Brendan McCullum are in any way dissuaded from doing the unorthodox or the outrageous because they lost the first test match.
Yeah, how do they reconcile that, though, against what the fans are expecting, the fans of English cricket, and that's for them to win the Ashes? Surely they can't risk another situation where they are taking chances that some would look at as unnecessary and end up losing another test match and by extension the Ashes at home.
I hear that point, but at the end of the day, Ricardo, you are remembered not by the results primarily, but how you play the game. Think about it yourself. I know you're a relatively young man. We found that out yesterday with the whole Red Stripe episode. But think about it yourself. We remember individuals and teams and players for what the feelings we get when we see them performing and playing. Not so much necessarily the results and how many titles that they would have won, but I get your point. But still, I believe that the English audience, as disappointed as they would be to lose to Australia at home, given what they've seen from this England team over the last year, I don't think it's just about win at any cost, to grind Australia to bat for 2.5 days and kill the game if it becomes necessary. I think that has gone out the window. And you can see it. Who would have thought that someone like a Joe Root, at the start of a morning's play, would try 2 Dill scoops, who would be from first slip urging on the crowd, urging them on, as if it's a football game, and the crowd is chanting. And I think that's what it's about. It's about engagement. It's about the fans feeling that they are part of the experience, even if it ends up, in this case, in a defeat. Because at the end of the day, it's the Ashes lore and the Ashes folklore that would have won and would have been embellished by this particular match.
You know, Faz, I may be young, and I am, but there are still aspects as it relates to the pureness of Test cricket that I still love and I still cherish. And maybe that's why I'm struggling to get over a declaration at 393 for 8 on the opening day against one of the very best teams in the world. It is an aggressive decision, yes, and it's great to be aggressive in sport and in cricket, but I also just felt for the duration of the test match, it was not the wisest decision. But Lance, I don't know what you think. I leave that there because, again, I am personally still stunned by that decision made by England. And I know they had other issues, but I still believe that that was a part of the reason they would have lost this test match eventually.
Yeah, I understand your point, Ricardo, very well, but I also understand where Fazir is coming from, because at the end of the day, people watch sport for entertainment, and how Fazir used the term, how engaging you are. And when he went in his narrative just now, it reminded me of the Brazil 1982 World Cup team that didn't win. They were knocked out in the quarterfinals. But even today, people still talk about that team with Zico and Socrates and so on, and the sort of impact that they were creating globally as football fans loved how they played. So I don't agree with Fazir 100% that, not that he said results don't matter, because that's not exactly what he said, but he was putting the emphasis on how engaging a team is as opposed to the results. And I think results end up being very important. And that is where I'm on your side, Ricardo, that maybe if they weren't so bold and so aggressive, things could have turned out a little better for them here. But Fazir, and we know that the posture from the England management at the moment, including their captain, is not to regret things and not to say, you know, that they made mistakes. But the Moeen Ali selection turned out to be a pretty dodgy one. And that, of course, is another issue from a selection standpoint that England may want to revisit.
Absolutely, because as we saw, the fact that you would not have played not just Test cricket, not even first-class cricket.
That's right.
But for 2 years.
Yeah, like Ravel Morrison.
Exactly. For 2 years, he had bowled nothing more than 4 over spells.
Yeah.
So to be called upon now on day 2 to be bowling 29 overs and then having that sore finger and the blisters opening up and so on. Clearly, they didn't think this out properly. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision. In fact, Ben Stokes said it himself. From the moment he got the news that Jack Leach was out, immediately he thought of Moeen Ali, but probably didn't really think about the broader context of having to bowl long spells and all of those different factors. So yes, that's going to have to be a factor, because the next test is in 8 days' time. Is the finger going to be repaired enough? Is the callus going to heal to allow him to play? Are they going to have to look at other options, depending? But yes, and the thing is, gentlemen, I take your point perfectly. But again, harkening back to that 60-61 series, which we discussed 2 years ago, and I presented it as the greatest test series of all time. Remember, that series came on the heels of one of the most dull, defensive, boring Ashes series that had ever been played. And it was felt necessary for those two teams to revive the game. And as much as I don't like it, in fact, I hate it, that only 3 teams are playing these 5 test series. The fact of the matter is that when you have such engagement, some such off-the-wall thinking, out-of-the-box thinking, controversial decisions, it engages the fans even more. And as we know, in this social media era, every fan wants to feel a part of the experience.
But isn't 393 for 8 on the opening day, scoring at over 5 runs per over, enough entertainment for fans of Test cricket?
Okay, well, having done that, let me now just throw additional spin by declaring. I remember Michael Clarke of Australia declaring behind the West Indies first innings total in Barbados in 2012 because he had such confidence in his team that they would still be able to get the job done. In a previous Ashes series, Don Bradman and company on a dodgy pitch, they decided to send in the tail-enders earlier. Again, it was tactical, which might be very different to what we're talking about here. But again, I think the message that we're getting from this England team, whether we like them or not, and let me lay my cards on the table. I want England to lose every match that they play, or every sport that they play. That's just me. But I have to.
But you picked them to win yesterday, Faz.
For the way that they play the game.
Okay.
Faz, I hear you. I fully hear you. And by the way, Faz, I'm actually surprised that this is the position that you have taken on this topic, because I fully expected you to go the other way. So unpredictable like England you are today.
Maybe it's the old age, maybe it's dementia, whatever it might be. But I give credit to England for the way they're playing the game right now.
And Faz, you made a very important point a couple of minutes ago, that this is a 5-test series. And given what we saw in the first test match in the series, this series is still wide open. And I'm pretty certain that if you talk to the heart of every single England player right now, they will have confidence that they can win this series.
Absolutely. I don't think there's anything that has happened in this test match to have England worried that they're going to be steamrolled. Don't be surprised if England come bouncing back at Lords, which is notably a ground where Australia generally perform well. But as I can't see any reason why England would be really disillusioned based on this result.
Yeah, they might just think it's not a test match they should have lost, but Australia 1-0 up, 4 test matches to go, and it makes it all the more gripping, including the build-up to the second test. Faz, thanks very much for joining us, and we'll be chatting a lot more throughout this series.
Even dinosaurs can change their skins.
It's break time.
The great Faz.
Stay with SportsMax on YouTube and follow us on all social pages for updates, news and entertainment.